Hey everyone, welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of convict Angela Simpson. More on her in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro. Angela Simpson was born on November 29th of 1975. While not much is known about Simpson's early years, she quickly became notorious for carrying out a very brutal murder at the age of 33 in August of 2009. She lured her 46-year-old disabled victim, Terry Neely, to her apartment with promises of drugs and sex. Once there, she tortured, killed, and dismembered him. Simpson also made Neely, who was confined to a wheelchair, watch in a mirror as she beat him and pulled out his teeth, as she wanted him to see the damage she was causing while doing so. The torture went on for 3 days. According to the autopsy results, Neely sustained multiple blunt force head injuries said to be accomplished via various items, including a tire iron, and a 3-inch nail had been driven or hammered into his brain. Also, he was strangled with a TV cable. Along with this, he was stabbed approximately 50 times, his throat was sliced, and he was dismembered. After that, Simpson placed his remains into a garbage can, took them to a church parking lot, and set them ablaze. They were found there later by the police. When asked for the reason for these horrific acts, she responded that she believed him when he told her that he was an informant for the police. While Simpson's intense hatred for the police force and their informants fueled her actions towards Neely, when asked if she had considered that he had maybe not been an informant, her response was a simple, well, oops if he wasn't. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a well-known interview by Simpson, and we'll be able to talk about some of the nonverbal displays that she does during this. And then also, there are some other interviews as well that are centered around this case. If this is popular enough, then maybe I'll visit some of those as well. I think that's enough of the back and forth here. Let's go ahead and begin the actual analysis.
Previous interviews, and I've with the police, and one of our colleagues talked to you once upon a time. You're very upfront.
Pretty much.
About talking about this killing.
Right.
Okay, so I want to make note of some things that we're seeing. She's holding very, very stable and strong eye contact here. There's not a lot of breaking of eye contact in general, and that means confidence usually. If somebody is able to hold that sort of eye contact, then they're confident in what they're doing. So with that confidence and boldness is notable, but along with that, you see that their expression is largely blank. She's not carrying out any form of emotive processing across her face, and this stays consistent throughout the interview, which is what lends to its eeriness. And then also her tone is a little bit softer and a little bit lower. This indicates relaxation and confidence. Again, we don't hear any agitation coming in with the tightening of the vocal cords, pitch changes, things like that. Let's continue watching.
Right.
You murdered this man.
Yes.
You tortured him.
Of course.
There is no ambiguity, and there is nothing you want to... In court today, you said you're not here to pretend to...
So each time that she is questioned about the incident, she does a little look off to the side with an affirmative yes, and of course, and a head nod in there as well. Now, with some nonverbal analysts, they might talk about how they might be recollecting in a certain way, depending on which direction they're looking. That's not necessarily the truth, and I didn't find that to be the case with Angela Simpson. However, if that were part of her nonverbal baseline, then that would be something we could pay attention to. That being said, we do see the small micro movements of her head up and down as she's saying these affirmative things, and that is synchronized, which would lead us to believe that she was telling the truth on that. Now, in this area, obviously, yes, she's telling the truth. She's in prison still, but at that time, that would be an indicator of authenticity. Let's continue.
To be remorseful.
Of course not. Why would I do that?
Are you remorseful?
Not at all.
Why?
Why would I be?
Well, why did this man deserve to die? You claimed he was a snitch.
Well,
what proof do you have of that?
He told me he was a snitch.
He told you.
On many occasions. But that really doesn't matter. Why did you guys want to kill me? Phoenix wanted to kill me. What's the difference? Everybody has a reason to kill. My reason might not be good to you, but your reason wasn't good to me. So...
This isn't a logical argument, and no, everybody doesn't have a reason to kill. Sorry to say. In general. That being said, now as they're asking about, are you feeling sorry? Do you feel any remorse for this? when they're responding with that, there are still micro movements no, as well as their answer no. Now these are synchronized as well. They do a substantial eye blocking movement in there as well while responding to that. So there is that question, are they trying to separate themselves on some level subconsciously? Not sure, but it is something to make note of. But the synchronized portions that we've seen from their answers so far just means that they have been very authentic during this. So let's continue watching to see what we see.
So.
The incident, can you tell me anything about what happened during those 3 days while you were at
What do you
this?
mean?
I don't know.
I took him to my house, walked him down the street. I don't know why the media acts like the motherfucker couldn't walk. He walked very well. Walked him upstairs, kicked.
This is interesting. She's starting to have a little bit of disgust coming into the corner of her nose here while talking about him being disabled and the media talking about how he was disabled and he walks very well. Nevertheless, Neely was living at an assisted living home, and he also did have a motorized wheelchair that he regularly commuted on. So even if he was not fully wheelchair confined, he did at least rely on it on some level, but she has a little bit of disgust and indignation would be a way of putting it, as she does an eye roll while looking away while talking about the media harping on that factor of things. Let's continue watching to see how this goes.
Upstairs, kicked his ass and killed him.
And again, your belief is that he was a snitch because he
Right.
told you. You claimed that other people had been killed in that same part. You had killed other people. Have you killed other people?
No, I've never killed anyone else.
So that was something to talk.
Right.
How do you feel about
Now, this is interesting. So this is in reference to another interview, which, like I said, if you would like to be able to see what that interview looks like as well, it's from earlier on, and it is fairly interesting as well. But this one's a little bit more well-known. So what he's referring to is she actually said that she had killed multiple other people and insinuated that she had done that, but obviously that was not the case here. Now, with that, when she's responding no, there is an eye blocking in there, but there is also disgust coming in and a micro movement no. Still, this does indicate to me that they are telling the truth. It seems synchronized all the way through, which then brings into question, why would they have lied about it in the first one? Why would they say that they had done this if they hadn't done this? And for the sake of show, of talking, so that attention-seeking behavior might be what caused them to lie at the earlier interview. Regardless, we're seeing this pop up here, so let's continue watching.
How do you feel about spending the rest of your life in prison?
You know, I got a lot of family in prison, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I got many sisters in prison. I can't wait to see them. It's really not that much of a punishment to be sentenced to spend my life with my family.
And you
So at the beginning of that, they have a flash of contempt come in, which is moral or intellectual superiority, which more or less aloofness. And then the verbal follows with that pretty clearly while they're talking about how they basically have a whole bunch of pals in prison. They would consider them family in prison, so that's not much of a punishment if they're going to prison with all of their family. That being said, what I've noticed about Simpson's vocal patterns and verbal patterns is that they will oftentimes also have short breaths in and bite off their sentences as if they're about to say something else and then they think and reconsider and say something new. That is fascinating to me, but it's not reflected as consternation or thought on their face. So I am curious how expressive and emotive their face really will be. And if they're able to maintain these smaller levels of tells, then perhaps that could be lending towards something like psychopathy or something along those lines. So let's continue watching.
And you don't want to talk about your past, but your lawyer said that, you know what, in sentencing you, the judge should bear in mind that you had a really
Right.
tough life.
I started being hospitalized at 10 years old. I have a mental history from 10 years old until present, so yeah.
When you say mental history, I mean, do you care that anyone feels sorry for you? Do you want anybody?
Feel sorry for me.
Yeah. Should the people who are watching this say because she had a bad childhood,
Of course
because
not.
she has mental illness,
Of course not, no.
that we should feel some sympathy for you?
No.
You would not have that.
I want no sympathy, no.
What then? Do you care what anybody thinks
No.
about Angela Simpson and what
No.
you have done?
Okay, so we're going throughout this entire thing. I have noted that they continually look off to the side at the same direction every time. And paying attention to how the light is falling across their face, it would also make sense in that there is a larger light coming from one side, and people are less likely to look into a light to be able to consider stuff, so an empty space would make more sense. So that regular looking off to the one side does make sense, especially if they're thinking, processing, or trying to recall information. So that's coming in there with them asking, what about the people that are feeling sorry for you? The actual confusion does set in with the drawing together and lowering of the eyebrows and the widening of the eyes. This is confusion coming in. Why would they? No shake in there as well. This is all synchronized. They seem genuinely surprised and confused why people would feel bad for them for doing this thing, which puts their mindset into such an interesting perspective of them apparently, seemingly understanding how terrible of a thing that they did, while also having no issue at all with it. It's very fascinating to see play out non-verbally, but let's go ahead and keep watching.
I don't.
It's, again, your candor. I've interviewed people who have committed murders before, and usually they sort of prevaricate or they this or that. You're about as direct as it gets.
Right.
Why is that?
It's only fair. I expect you to be the same way.
Okay. Do you think that it was fair today? It was justice in that courtroom?
No, I don't.
Okay, I was about to say this is leading up to a no. If you see them looking and thinking and planning, you can see the corner of their mouth ever so lightly twitching upwards, and that's contempt. That usually will mean, oh, I know something or feel something that they don't, and that would lead to no, I don't feel like it was fair at all. So let's see what they're saying, why they don't feel it was fair. Let's watch.
Why?
I should have gotten the death penalty.
Did you want the death penalty?
No, I'd prefer to spend my life with my sisters, but yeah, I do believe that would have been justice.
So you deserve death penalty, but you're glad that you got what you got.
Right.
Because you...
Right.
When you say your sisters, you're talking about...
Still so fascinating, their point of view of things, of being able to look at their actions as coldly and factually as they can to say, yeah, I feel like I did deserve this, but I'm pretty happy that I didn't get that. It is just fascinating to see that level of self-awareness here. And this is not uncommon in killers of the past, even with Jeffrey Dahmer. If we go back and look at his, or if you've watched that analysis, he also presented this very cool, calm, collected idea of himself, even though he was listing off these terrible things that he was doing, and he was aware of it. Same with Kemper as well. Oftentimes the killers are well aware of the heinous acts that they're carrying out, but they don't seem bothered by them. And so this is fascinating to be able to see play out non-verbally, because it helps us see what this disconnect can look like, to have somebody who can have and have done terrible things, but not have it reflect on them non-verbally, because it can happen, and this is a prime example of it. So let's watch.
You're talking about women you know in prison.
Right.
Okay, and have you found that there is some bonding, and that you have made friends here that will be of some comfort to you when you're in prison?
Most definitely, yes.
Most definitely, yes.
Yeah.
What has the experience been like here in this facility?
Horrible.
Really?
Yes, it's terrible. Jealous.
This one's interesting because this doesn't seem like it might be the case. So they're saying horrible, but they have a contempt expression coming in. So it's a horrible experience. And then they have a little micro movement no as well, while they're saying, yeah, it's terrible. It's just terrible. Now, that micro movement no, it is just big enough that it could be considered perhaps a macro movement no, which, for those of you who don't know, the smaller the movement, the less likely it is to be consciously controlled. So with this one, since it is fairly large, it could be an intentional move no. Now, if that's the case, that would center in around the you wouldn't believe. The you would not believe causes the head shake no. Synchronized still makes sense. If it were lightly smaller, and it was not lining up with that, then it could be considered a desynchronization, which if that's the case, then it'd be like, well, if it's not as bad being shown by your contempt in this small movement, then what's going on? What do we need to know about this situation? However, in that it was just a little bit larger, it feels rather macro. That would be, I believe, related to the you wouldn't believe side of emotion. So let's go ahead and continue.
Jail is awful. They don't, they have no, well, they have no compassion. They don't give us the things we need here.
Will prison to your understanding?
I certainly hope so, yes.
Have you done time in prison?
No.
So you're hoping that it will be a better existence?
Yes,
for you,
definitely.
You're a young woman, 36 years old. You could be there a long time.
Right. Right.
But your belief is that you deserve the death penalty.
Definitely. Well, I believe God. That's what God says. Unless God is wrong, which I doubt, so.
And when God has told you that, or you just believe that
I believe
eye
that.
for an eye?
Right.
Something's interesting here. They do the continual lip biting or licking manipulator over and over and over again. So I've been trying to see if there's a pattern and when that comes out. Is it around areas of perhaps stressors? Not that I've noticed, but then it also has come out in areas where there have been stressful questions, something along those lines. Now, they've also pulled into this factor God, which means that they're relying on some sort of external higher power to be able to determine what they can and can't do, which is always a fascinating ploy, especially coming from somebody who just murdered somebody else. I find it interesting that she does decide to pull in this, I believe, in God factor side of things, where it's not really addressed again anywhere else. It's a fascinating little tidbit that they have there, so I'll hold on to that as we continue watching.
Eye.
Right. Right. I expected to die for this.
What insights can you give us to you? What would you have anyone who may hear this interview know about you?
There's really nothing. People are going to believe what they want to believe. Judge the way they want to judge, just like I do, so.
Yeah.
So be it.
Why did you feel like you were in a...
They weren't holding much eye contact during that entire time. A lot of looking down, a little bit of disgust coming into there. They have a little bit of angst, it seems, around being misunderstood by the general public. People are going to judge however they want to, as I will too. So they offer that like qualifier for it. Well, I'll do it too. So this is fascinating. They do not feel like they are understood by people around, which valid. I feel like most people who would do the things that they did probably don't feel understood by the people around them, but it is showing up non-verbally that there is something that people do not understand, and nor do they have the desire to try to communicate it to them. Now, is this related to some of the contemptuous expressions that we saw earlier? Perhaps. We're not able to say that for sure, but let's continue watching.
Did you feel like you were in a position to be the judge and jury in Terry Neely's life?
I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm really not trying to get you
Right.
angry, but I want to see, you say, I killed this guy, he deserved to
Right.
die, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's there, you're up
Right.
front. I want to know if you have any concerns about what put you in that position to do that to them.
It was just too much. The things he talked about, it was too much.
Do you believe him? I mean, lots of people go around claiming I'm a snitch or make themselves...
Really, you don't say.
Well, I think they talk about law. I know people coming. I've got
This is an interesting opportunity for me to be able to see, because it's a full body shot of Simpson here, and we're not seeing any agitation or nervous gestures coming out across the rest of their body as well. So oftentimes, especially in this area where they like laugh, oh, you don't say it, laugh sort of thing, you'll start to see some agitation gestures coming out. Maybe their feet will start bouncing, or they'll start wringing their hands a little bit more, as laughter will oftentimes cause extra movement in the rest of the body. It's not showing up here, which is fascinating, and it makes me question what their psychological state is while referring to this. If that's the case, and they are not having synchronization between the laughter that they're producing and the rest of their nonverbal communication across their body, then that would be forced or fake laughter, but it felt rather fluid from the top half up. So they're very, very capable of lying and pulling off a lie, or forcing an emotion or faking an emotion. Whereas if we're able to see the rest of the body, we can see where it's fake. But along with that, I do want to know that they are lightly mirroring each other with the leg crossing and the general posturing that they each have in the chair. And Simpson is not stressed by this. They're not sitting in any specially closed or tense fashion. They seem to be sitting there having a chat over coffee with somebody. And that's eerie considering the circumstance and offsetting for a lot of people, but let's continue watching.
associations with law enforcement. You know, I've got this, I'm a friend with this
Do you happen to have a list of those people?
They name drop, well, maybe in the circle, but you know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right.
People say lots of things to make themselves sort of look...
Well, he picked the wrong to say that to, if he wanted to brag about putting so many people in prison. You picked the wrong person.
and
so-
that's what did it to him. That's why you...
What, the bragging?
The bragging
Oh, yeah.
about putting people in prison.
Right.
People you knew?
No. No,
But
I
he-
don't know any of them.
Okay. Do you believe him? Do you think he really was a snitch?
Oops, if he wasn't.
So this is that line that I mentioned at the beginning. Do you believe him? But what if he wasn't? You know, what if he wasn't a snitch? Oops. if he wasn't. So I'm still watching to see their limbs to see if they're going to start moving in any areas. And we're starting to see some movements and fidgets here and there in this area while talking about the reliability of what she had been told or interpreted. And maybe that's an indicator of agitation or nervousness around that. Perhaps they are realizing that, maybe this person wasn't in fact a snitch, which they weren't. It was proven that they weren't. But even with that, even with acknowledging that, we hear that they couldn't really care too much about it to begin with, which is, it is what it is. So let's continue.
Yes, I believe he was.
Yeah. Do you have family?
I do.
From an adopted family? Or
I have 4 children.
You have 4 children?
I do have 4 children.
Where are they?
El Mirage.
What is, how are they doing? And how is it for you to be separated from them?
I don't want to talk about my children. I can't do that.
Yeah. Is there a message for what? Is there a bottom line or a lesson to be learned from the story of Angela Simpson?
There's a bottom line to everything. But
what is the bottom line?
I just want to make note that this is the only area where they have not been very forthtelling about their experience, their feelings on whatever they're talking about. When it comes to their children, they drop off in tone and pitch a substantial amount. Along with that, their eyes look down and they relax in their face a bit. This indicates sadness. So with that drop off in tone and pitch, and then the reflection on their face as well, and the breaking of eye contact, all of this clustered around, there's something around her children that I'm wondering how much of an effect is being had in that they are aware of what they have done. Perhaps this is the area that they feel shame. It might be shameful in that we see them break eye contact and look away, perhaps, but I'm not dead positive. However, there was something around that caused a little bit of extra consternation and processing. So children are very important to them. Specifically, their children hold a specific place of value to them, which is still just very fascinating to me to see where their value systems lie. Let's continue.
Bottom line to this story.
Whatever people want it to be. It doesn't matter what I say. I don't know.
Insights that you don't regret killing this guy.
I don't regret killing him, no. I regret the fact that my co-defendants found it necessary to divulge so much information to the detectives. I regret that. They were people I really cared about. And I regret that they were near me or around me at any point.
And then helped prosecutors.
Helped the prosecution, correct.
You aggravated those people.
So this is fascinating. Their initial response to that is very verbatim and very drawn out, which would be one of those instances even where we heard Bill Clinton back in the day.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
We're hearing this same sort of I did not do ... that verbal patterning come out, which is a distancing and a separation, and then the qualifier thereafter of, oh, actually, I do have regrets, and these are the regrets, so I don't regret this thing. I was letting you know earlier on, verbal patterning, but now here's the actual explanation for it. So that coming in there is fascinating to note, and then all that they're noting is that they have regrets about the people that were around them talking to the police and letting the police know what she had done. And that's not exactly the most comforting thing to know that that's what they regret. But let's continue watching.
Those people.
Definitely, because they didn't know, they weren't actually with me during any of my crimes. So for them to say that they were to try to get lesser sentences was a little heartbreaking for me.
So friends of yours lied to prosecutors and lied to police.
Correct.
Dropped the dime on you.
Correct.
They snitched on you.
Correct.
If you could, would you do to them what you did to Terry?
No, I would not.
Because you still have some relationship with them, or?
Well, no, but I had claimed a bond with them at one point, so I wouldn't be able to.
Now they're getting unsettled, so we're feeling out some difficulties here as well. I'm trying to figure out what it was that might have driven this level of intense hatred-filled crime. to be carried out. And so we're hearing some aspects around various facets of their processing. So it doesn't necessarily matter that there was a person who informed the police. It matters if there was a person who informed the police that they didn't get along with or didn't consider friends before. And we're seeing them get unsettled by this because they've already said that, like all snitches need to have terrible things done to them. But unless it's snitches that I personally have a connection with, and then maybe the rules can be bent. And so they're having agitation centered around that. You can hear that popping up, and their breathing sharpening a little bit and quickening as well, and looking around and having some verbal and vocal difficulties and stutters in there, which all indicate being unsettled and caught off guard by that question. So we're getting some pieces here. Let's continue watching.
Avenge that.
Yeah. Did you act completely alone in that?
Yes,
apartment?
definitely.
So nobody else helped?
No. Totally alone.
Help me understand.
That totally alone is interesting to me. I would say that they answered authentically before. The synchronization between the yeses and the nos, everything flowed quite nicely. There were no spikes in their nonverbal communication for me to be like, maybe not. But then when they reiterate totally alone, there's something that comes into there emotively as well. And I'm not sure what it is. The first thing that popped out to me was the relaxation of their face, which would push me towards perhaps sadness, something along those lines with the totally alone, very isolated. I'm very fascinated by some of these aspects that are creeping out. Let's continue.
For three, I know the crimes of passion or something, and in the heat of the moment. But to spend 3 days driving nails into a guy's head and pulling his teeth out.
Right.
Why?
I found it necessary.
So while he starts talking about some of the more specifically brutal things that she did during that time, we see some eye-blocking gestures come out, and they're even to the extent of being a fluttering gesture, which means extra psychological processing in there. So I'm seeing that come in, and then there's a very long hesitation before she says, I found it necessary, and has a little bit of a partial shrug in there and a little movement. No, I wouldn't necessarily actually buy that reasoning behind it. There's something else there that they're not sharing or divulging. In that, I would want to circle back around and try to see if there's another way to attack that question, to see if there's a way that you can reword it to unearth more information, something along those lines. Regardless, it just struck me as fascinating, but let's continue.
Did you find it pleasurable or exciting, or was this just
necessary?
Necessary.
Right.
So this was more like a business-like proposition you were doing.
So with the it's just necessary, we had a no shake in there. We had disgust flash across their face. Along with that, there was a partial shrug in there, which this would be an I don't know. The disgust would line up as well. I would actually say that this seems to be fairly synchronized, although fairly complex with the different emotive things that they're showing in this area. But there seems to be at least something else that's there, an emotive drive that might not be mentioned, something else, not sure. Let's continue.
We're doing something that you felt a job that needed to be done.
Right.
Really?
Right.
And whatever came into your head, I'm going to drive a nail into his head. Or was this just a symptom of what was at hand in that apartment?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Another reposturing when talking about the nail being driven into his head. They're not comfortable with that detail. They're aware that that's a very harsh one. And so far in each time that it's been mentioned, they've done some form of agitation centered around that. With this, if they're feeling discomfort on some of the activities or things that they did, I'm wondering if this is something that was inspired by activities that were in their past before, where they have this affinity towards children and understanding that children are innocent and should be cared for, but then a hatred for the police and this isolation and everything that boils around into this, and then still having discomfort for the things that were done later. Perhaps that's because it's a crime driven more out of anger or a sense of revenge rather than mindless. He said he was a snitch, so I just decided that all snitches need to die. It's just fascinating to see this creep out. So let's watch.
Right.
Your moment. I'd like to, because we've got to get run back, and
Right.
I want to get what you say on television. And I'm grateful that you would be willing to talk to us, and I wish you the best under these
Thank you.
circumstances. What would you have the world know? You're sort of an interesting character, because first of all, women generally don't commit crimes this heinous.
Right.
This is usually the domain of men.
That's unfortunate.
You think more women?
Oh, yeah, equal opportunity, definitely.
And I know you're being sort of a smart aleck to me.
Slightly sarcastic.
But
Yeah,
but
I can do
seriously,
that.
in some ways, I've been covering murder and mayhem and covered serial killers to petty shoot-'em-ups.
So this is another interesting aspect of it that lends to the complexity of Simpson's characters, that they obviously are able to even hold this form of violence in a light regard, even comparing it to a social circumstance that they're using there with sarcasm. So I'm wondering if these areas where they've shown discomfort with the behaviors that they've shown, and since they have been smaller and more micro, if that's not more genuine, and this very bold, brash, oh yeah, no big deal sort of thing that they're displaying here is not actually more of a mask. I'm wondering if this was driven by fear, hatred, and sadness rather than a psychopathic need to fulfill a drive, if that makes sense. Let's continue watching.
Shoot-'em-ups. And you don't meet many women who commit the kind of calculated, long-term murder that you committed with this guy. You don't meet many people who are willing to say, I did it, and you know what? Deal with it.
Right. That's the way it should be, in my opinion.
But you seem so. You seem like you're sort of I'm sort of almost self-righteous about. I did this, and I did. Do you think you did the right thing by killing this guy?
Definitely.
Other than shooting his mouth off, what else did he do that you know of?
That's what he got done for. He's
Shooting.
white trash. Somebody had to take it out. That's it.
Was there a
Okay, so now we're having some other elements come in here with race being brought in, and the fascinating point of him challenging, like, what is that all that he did? He ran his mouth off, and so that really needed and required you to do this, and they have difficulty responding to that. There's a hesitation with a contempt smile in there. There's something else there that they know. There's another piece of information that's there that they are aware of. Otherwise, contempt wouldn't need to exist there. And then they say he was white trash and he needed to be taken care of. So with that, we're still getting more and more pieces of this kind of puzzle that is Angela Simpson falling together. I find it very fascinating. Let's talk a little bit more about that at the very end, but let's continue watching for now.
Was there a racial component to it?
Oh, there's always a racial component.
Okay. And what do you mean by that?
I'm not going to elaborate on that at all.
Okay, but the fact that you're a black woman and he's a white guy, that factored into your killing him?
Yeah. I wouldn't kill another black individual.
Okay. Would you, if you had that moment to live over again?
I'd have kept him alive a week.
But you would have still tortured him and killed him.
Oh, I'd have tortured him for a week, yeah, instead of 3 days. Definitely.
So you're only...
So an interesting cluster of movements here. So while talking about various aspects of the racial side of things, she continues to cock her head off to the side. Now, this cocking of the head off to the side is an indicator of confidence. This can easily be done to even just display confidence, even if you're not feeling it. Exposing the neck in this area is very vulnerable. And so evolutionarily speaking, you wouldn't normally be like, yo, check out this area where you can just really end my life really quickly if you want to. So when you're feeling confident and unthreatened, that will come out. So they're cocking their head, and this could also be inquisitive or curious as well. But then whenever he starts asking about what if you could do it all over again, then she says, oh, I would have kept him alive for a week. And she shifts from being off to the side to more of an aggressive head down, like I'm challenging you. I'm stating something that I know is very brash and very harsh. So this shift in here is still fascinating to me. Lets me know that on some level there is a conscious willingness to seem creepy I believe, is what they're going for in this. Otherwise, that shift wouldn't have happened as they shifted from one part of it to another. I just find it very interesting that they are intentionally doing some of these nonverbal moves. Let's keep watching.
Definitely.
So your only regret is that the torture didn't go on any longer.
Right, and I regret not killing my other victim. I should have killed him too. I just didn't have time. I had to go somewhere.
And tell me who that other victim was.
Joseph Van Tress for the armed robbery. Yeah. I should have killed him, but I had to go.
Will you kill again?
If the opportunity arises, I hope so. Okay, we're done.
Are you done?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Angela.
Good shit, dude. That's gonna be crazy, isn't it? That's gonna be wicked. Make it look good, please. Oh, you're gonna put this on too?
Well, look, you know,
Don't put the ending on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But honestly, best wishes to you and
Right.
ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very real. I honestly can't.
Saw me again. This guy's incorrigible.
Huh?
Okay.
Yeah,
Go.
I'm incorrigible.
All right, not you.
He's incorrigible. We're both incorrigible.
Right.
Best wishes to you.
Right.
Thank you.
I have other meetings.
Well.
Okay, so there's that interview. Very unsettling, and even down there at the very, very end where they break harshly, "Are we done?" So they have a large contempt smile come out before saying, "Are we done?" And then the full smile comes across. And then they break into laughter that seems to be genuine laughter and humor. They appreciate, from what I'm seeing, they appreciate the show of being creepy, of being this murderer, of being this terrible person that they've painted themselves out to be. So they appreciate that sort of attention. But there is something that's underneath this crime that seems to be driving it a little bit further, as we saw from the other smaller movements throughout the interview. In the other interview that I've mentioned, which, like I said, if you would like to see it, let me know in the comments below, or by, sharing this video around and whatnot. That's how I usually tell if a video needs a second piece or not, is if this video does well, then maybe it'll get a second. In the other interview, they also mentioned people who are child molesters being the same as snitches, and that murderers are nowhere near as evil as those two groups. And so if we take that information in as well, that helps add some clarity to the picture. I'm wondering if there was something that happened to Angela Simpson when they were much younger that would push them to have an intense hatred for the police force, and even more so racially towards white people as well, that would all lend to this person here. It's very fascinating. So there are still a number of things that you can get from these sorts of interviews. Even though she maintained a fairly blank expression through most of it, there was still some information that we could glean from that, and some things that might be able to be picked at or prodded at. If you want to be able to see the next half, go ahead and do all those thingies. If you did like this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already. I should be uploading at least once a week. Maybe I'll get around to uploading more, maybe I won't. Everybody has great questions on that front. If you would like to be able to reach out to me, you can do so via the socials. I will either respond myself or somebody from the team will be able to respond. If you're looking to send something my way, I do also have a PO box that's listed in the description of this video and all the other videos as well. But I think that's all of the talking about various things that we need to do. That is all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.